Hi. Okay. That's my first time using the gavel. So, welcome to the curriculum committee meeting of June 22nd, 2023. And I think we do the Pledge of Allegiance.
We do, yes.
Okay, and we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I am filling in here for President Wiedemann, but luckily there's not that much for me to do. And I'm mostly just going to hand it over to Ms. Saxa.
Thank you so much. So we have several items on the agenda this evening. Number one, we have the representatives from Pupil Services talking to us about the special education English language arts curriculum development process that they engaged in this year. We then have a presentation that will come to us via recording and some live interjection regarding the upcoming general ed English language arts curriculum audit cycle. And then we have two information items that we will address after that. And then, of course, we have time for public comment. So I would like to introduce this evening for our special education and ELA curriculum development update, two people. The first is Natalia Adalizzi. She is our coordinator or supervisor of special programs at the elementary level. And she has brought with her one of our teachers who is also doing an internship, Nicole Dolsky. I thank them both for their presence here this evening.
Thank you. Well, thanks, guys. Good evening. Extra special thanks to Nicole for joining us 2 days after schools have closed. You know, she was willing to come back on and help us out. So thank you very much. And again, thank you to the school board, Ms. Saxa, for having me this evening. I've been here a few times kind of reviewing what we planned our process to be, giving you an update on our process. And now as we kind of close out the process, I'm here to follow through on, what our development recommendations are. Nicole?
Yeah. So good evening. First, I'd like to provide just a brief explanation of reading development and then share what we've accomplished thus far through the curriculum audit cycle. So when it comes to literacy instruction, there's what's known as the Big Five, or the 5 pillars of literacy instruction. And these include decoding, so reading the words, encoding, spelling the words, reading comprehension, so understanding written and verbal language, as well as vocabulary and fluency. Additionally, writing is a component of English language arts, but for the purpose of today in our audit, I'll focus just a little bit on reading development so that we all have some common language around the audit. So this is Hollis Scarborough's reading rope, which was established in 2001 to really explain the process of reading. So this rope demonstrates the combinations of the strands or the subskills that work together to become intertwined, creating increasingly automatic and systematic reading. So you'll notice that there are more than 5 strands up there, but really it's because each area of literacy instruction consists of several subskills. So the top layer of the rope is labeled word recognition, and this is really where students read and spell words. So for example, when you see the word think written, you know that TH in that case says th and not t, and that the I says I and not I, and then you know the sounds for N and K. You blend those together to create the word think. Now, in order to read that word, you used your decoding skills, you broke it apart, you blended them together, but you did this in an automatic way. And this isn't something that all of our students know how to do quite yet. So this process has helped us to examine the resources that we have to create automatic, fluent, and skilled readers. The bottom strand demonstrates language comprehension, which allows students to become more strategic readers. And together, those two strands become interwoven or intertwined, creating increasingly automatic, skilled, and consolidated reading. So in order to achieve our goal of creating a community of skilled readers, we examined our current special education ELA curriculum to see what opportunities we had to continue to support our students. So you can switch Thanks. So the first step was to conduct an internal analysis where teachers completed surveys regarding the current curriculum resources that they use. Teachers indicated areas of literacy that they felt that they had appropriate amount of resources for, as well as some areas where they needed some additional resources. We reviewed current instructional practices as well as student performance data to determine where there are areas of our students that are demonstrating some areas for growth and where they are demonstrating success. We also received feedback from families that we served on their perspective and experience with our ELA curriculum for special education families. Finally, we consulted with the Delaware County Intermediate Unit, as well as a special education advisor through the Bureau of Special Education, and examined the practices of other school districts. This process led us to identify 4 focus areas within our special education ELA curriculum and instruction that we'll target as a result of this audit. So I'll turn it back over to Natalia to discuss further the outcomes of our audit and where we're going next. But I'm really proud to be a teacher at Haverford and to have this opportunity to participate in this experience.
Thank you so much. So where Nicole left off at is the 4 areas, just to remind you, and I've already kind of gone over the data and why we got to this. Excuse me. But, I think here's how I was trying to figure out how I could best describe this, right? And so every month I head to the pharmacy to pick up medications for my son. And the pharmacy where I go, they have totally redone the pharmacy. And now when you stand at the pharmacy, you can see an entire wall and rows of various, medication bottles. Some are big, some are small. Some clearly are for holding liquid, right? And that really kind of encaptures what we do in the special education world, in that every single child and every single learner is unique. And so while in their IDEA eligibility category, we might be looking at a specific learning disability, the needs of every student, even with a specific learning disability, are very different. And so how we tackle that and how we teach and instruct those students varies. And so I use that as an example because it's important for us to have lots of different tools and resources, right? Just as a doctor would want to have lots of various, medications at their disposal, we need lots of different resources. So I really thank you for the opportunity for us to share this, but also for, allowing us to go through in this process because it so greatly benefits students. A big thank you. Nicole is one part of our audit team, but there were a whole lot of teachers, principals, other administrators that went into this process. So this was our entire audit team, and I just want to, publicly thank them because they really are our internal experts, right? They're the people who are teaching our children every day, and they know our students best. And so their input into this process was incredibly important. And so for the evaluation process, I think I need to start with a big thank you to Ms. Saxa, to Ms. Connolly, who couldn't be here this evening, Aaron Smith-Dells, and Nicole, because they have just been so integral in our operations and working together as a team, curriculum and pupil services. Oftentimes we meet with other districts, and I think that the relationship that we have really puts our students at the forefront because we do really work in tandem to be able to meet the needs of every single learner. And special education and effective special education can only occur when we have a really effective MTSS block. And our data has shown that effective MTSS block is really working and we're providing great interventions for students. And so we know that when we make a referral to special ed, we've tried everything that we can in the general education world. And now it's really time to get more information about that learner and dig deeper into their learning and figure out what it is that we need to provide. Because teaching kids how to read is one of the most important things that we do. And so we take that mission very seriously. And I think expanding some of the resources that we even have will continue to allow us to do that. And so to kind of, go back to this piece though, at first we really reviewed a ton of research. And I think I explained that, but there's also research on programs of effectiveness, how they work, what types of students they work for. And so that's where we started. Sandy and I, we meet every other week, and we really sat in a room and we looked through multiple research studies, and if they didn't kind of pass that first level of like research criteria, we didn't even move them, forward in our process. So you'll see that we considered a lot, but very quickly, without ample research to show that they're effective interventions for our students, we didn't even move them through to our full audit evaluation team. There is a lot of information from both PTAN, which is our parent network in Pennsylvania through the Bureau of Special Ed, but also the International Dyslexia Association provides a ton of information for us as professionals on research best practices and even how to help evaluate curriculum so they know that it's going to be effective, because we want to be very cognizant that we're being thoughtful with our students' time. So we have a long list of all that we considered for decoding. You can see them up there. As Nicole shared a little bit earlier, and she did an excellent job, obviously, because she's an excellent reading teacher, of explaining what decoding is, but it's our ability to read words. And so we did look at several programs, and you will see that we have selected 2 programs that we feel will continue to help meet the needs of our learners. One is Wilson Intensive Reading, to continue to expand upon our use of that program. And then the addition of a new program, which is called Friends on the Block. And so our general education students, as I'm sure you've heard in previous curriculum meetings, already are using Wilson Foundations. And we've seen a lot of success with that for our students. We then also, through our MTSS program, use Wilson Foundations, but at the intervention level. And we see even more success with that, and that picks up even more students and puts them on a path to literacy. And so for us, in looking at the research, the logical next step was to then move to, when we have a smaller percentage of students, moving to that Wilson Intensive Intervention. We already have had students who do receive Wilson Intensive Intervention, and even the data within our own district for our own Haverford students really supports that for many of those students, it absolutely puts them on a path to achievement. And so while Wilson, I think, many would be considered like the gold standard of intensive multisensory reading curriculums, it doesn't work for every student. And so that's where we have to go back to the cabinet and figure out what else can we use. And so that's where the recommendation for Friends on the Block comes from. It has more pictures, it has more practice, and so it will allow students of varying abilities access to systematic phonics instruction, but really at their level. When we look at, comprehension, so the whole goal of reading is, one, once you learn how to read, once you know how to read, you can gain knowledge, right? And that's why it's so very important. And so when we were looking at various programs, that was one of the pieces that we really wanted it to be all-encompassing, that it would help with understanding vocabulary, understanding of phrases, looking at different sentences, sentence types, the connections of paragraphs. So really having something that, for some students, they really need very explicit instruction on sentence types, combining sentences, where oftentimes, for some students, reading comes a little bit more naturally, right? Or when I do learn to read, the comprehension piece of that comes naturally. And so the finalist that we had for comprehension is Voyager Passport, because it provides, reading comprehension. It builds on a ton of background knowledge for students. And so oftentimes when students enter the classroom, they're relying on a lot of background knowledge. And every child in the classroom has varying degrees of background knowledge. And so Voyager Passport gives students a similar playing field as far as background knowledge goes. So, if you're reading something about a zoo and you've been to a zoo before, that has a lot of meaning. If you are reading about a zoo and you haven't been to a zoo before, there's that whole background knowledge component that you're not coming to the table with. And so Voyager Passport, we felt, that did a really nice job of giving students some of that foundational background knowledge to be able to pull on and then therefore apply into their reading. So as far as writing, when we looked at writing, there are some writing curriculums that are very explicit in that they teach like word type, sentence type. I know that when I went to school, you outline sentences, right? And while for some students we employ those practices, for us, when we looked at these 3 candidates, writing revolution is more of an approach to writing. And that was important because it will enable teachers to apply, I'm trying to think of the best way to say it, like a particular skill, but across various settings, right? And so if a student's in science or they're in social studies, I don't have to have taught you a specific sentence in science. I'm going to employ some skills to get you to take one word about science, magnet. Okay, now let's expand that word. Magnets are heavy. Okay, right? And so then kids are being able to build off of one idea. And we thought that this was best because it will allow our teachers to support students, because our general education students are writing, they're not just writing in ELA, right? They're writing in math, they're writing in science, they're writing in social studies. I was actually in a music class and kiddos were writing, even the last week of school. They were keeping them busy. And so it will allow the student to apply that knowledge all across their day. And for us, that was really important. We will spend the summer, Sandy and I, and we'll certainly employ our teachers as well to help with this. But here we're at the recommendation step. Next, we need to communicate it to all of our staff, right? So our audit team. So we'll start to come up with some plans about how we're going to communicate that, what that looks like, planning for professional development. Our teachers will be super busy those few days in August, learning about all our new curriculums, and most importantly, learning how to use them, when to use them, and for what students to use them for. We had the privilege this year of going through, thanks to you all, we went through our DCIU literacy training, a year-long DCIU literacy training. And I didn't mention this earlier, but we were kind of ahead of the curve at Haverford in doing that. This year, the state has come out and said, hey, for next year, elementary teachers have to have structured literacy training. And all of our special education teachers, Erin Smith-Dells, Sandy Connolly, they all attended those structured literacy trainings with us last year, this current year, because that gives our teachers now, hey, we have some more resources. All of that training gives us the knowledge to know when and how to use those resources to be most effective for students. And so we're going to continue with some of that, and we'll continue planning through our flex courses, and then implementation, putting rubber to the road for students. So thank you for your time tonight. Do you have any questions?
Thank you so much. That was a great presentation.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you again, Nicole. I appreciate you being here.
I do have a quick question.
Sure.
Just with what you were just saying about the education piece and the professional development.
Mm-hmm.
So will that just be geared towards special education teachers, or it'll be everyone?
No, so what's really, I highlight it as what's really nice about it is because our special education teachers went through the training this year. Mm-hmm. Sandy, Erin Smith-Dells, and Nicole Dolsky are all going to work together to bring that knowledge to all of our general education teachers. And so when I say that we were kind of ahead of the curve, it's good because we've already had like our trial run, right? Mm-hmm. We know the areas that our teachers had more questions about. We knew, where we needed to follow up a little bit. And so we've really been able to pilot it with our 60 special education teachers or so, plus some speech and language pathologists and psychologists who attend it. And now we'll be able to learn from that. So when we do, carry it over to all of our general education teachers, that structured literacy training will just be more effective. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that this audit process has been ongoing. You've been presenting at the curriculum committee meetings for I don't know how long about this audit, and I know this has been a heavy lift, a lot of ongoing work, a lot of ongoing training, and even just reviewing all of these, for every single aspect of ELA, like decoding, you and all of your team are evaluating very deeply all of these different resources to come up with some finalists. So I know how much work that must take.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing
thank you.
all
And it really does take a village. Like Sandy and I work in tandem to kind of spearhead it, but without our teachers, our reading specialists, we wouldn't, our psychologists, we wouldn't be where we are today. So thank you.
Yeah. So I'm glad.
I'll pass that on to them.
I'm glad to hear it's kind of like coming to fruition too.
It is.
So we've been hearing a lot about it. So I'm glad to see that it's, it's heading closer to the implementation steps.
Yeah. Thank you.
Exciting too. Yeah.
All right.
Great. Thank you so much to
Thank
Natalia
you.
and to Nicole. And both of our presenters this evening do have some other obligations this evening, so I told them it would be okay to go after questions. So if everybody's sure, going once, going twice. Okay, thank you both for being here. We appreciate it. All right. We are going to move on to the next item in the agenda, which is the English Language Arts General Education Audit process. And it was really nice to have that sort of recalling of all the steps that special education went through, because that's exactly the process that general education goes through. So I wanted to share a couple of reminders about that process, and I'm going to do so. Sandy Connolly, who would typically be here to present, was unable to be here this evening, but she did send along a video. So we'll hear a little bit from Sandy about the process and how we anticipate it will look this year. Chris, if you don't mind, can you click, there you go, that's the audit, and then can you click to the next one? Okay, Sandy did ask me to share some celebrations. She starts every meeting with celebrations, like with teachers, so thank you so much. She wanted to do the same thing with the board. We looked at, and anybody can find the information that we have on this slide using the PVOS public access portion of the website. If you go over there, you can search for districts and you can do these comparison reports. And when you do that, it sort of lists it lists every single district and charter in the state of Pennsylvania. And then it lists the percentage proficient, the percentage advanced, percentage below basic, et cetera, for grades 4 through 8. And then they do that for each of the subjects that are tested. They do it for the keystones. They do it for all these things. But the really nice thing I like about it is that it's somewhat interactive, and you can actually click and sort by each of those columns. So if you were to do that and you list for every district and charter in the state that administered 4 through 8 PSSAs, and you go over all the way to the right to the across the grades, where they take the percentage of students who were either proficient or advanced across grades 4 through 8, and you sort, then you'll find sort of where we are relative to other districts in the state and other charters in the state. They don't remove the charters, you can only look at it with both. So as you can see, for the 22 PSSAs anyway, which they only do 1 year at a time, so when 23 is out, they'll get rid of 22 and put 23 in there, but we at least have 22s. Sandy wanted to celebrate that when you do that sorting for grades 4 through 8, Haverford comes in at number 25 out of 643 districts and charters in the state, which puts us in the top 4% of districts according to those measures, right? That's 4 through 8, percentage of students proficient or advanced. And then when you look at the literature keystone, which is typically taken in 10th grade for most students, we were 31st out of 582, fewer institutions giving that exam. That puts us in the top 5% of the state. So Sandy wanted to make sure that you as a board and the public knew that looking at data is an important part of the audit process, and she wanted to start with a little celebration. The whole thing isn't celebrations, right? We also look for areas for improvement, but as we introduce this concept, she wanted to share that. So we're gonna go ahead to the next slide with the video, but before we hit play, I can't resist an opportunity to talk about our curriculum review cycle. So I'm just gonna give a quick one, because it's been a little while. As you can see, this chart, I know it's a little hard to see, maybe if you're sitting farther away, but I'll just go through it very quickly. This chart basically talks us through each of the steps of a curriculum audit cycle. It's generally a 6-year process, a 5 or 6 year process. If we can move faster through a stage, we do, and if we can't, we don't. So generally speaking, there's an audit process, which you're going to hear more about in the 5 minutes that Sandy shares, and you heard a little bit about what Natalia and Nicole shared. That's basically looking internally. What do our test scores say? What do our students say? What do our teachers say? What do our families say? How do we do things right now? And how does that compare with the external audit, which is what are the standards for each grade? What are sort of the national trends or the recommendations from the literature? What are other exemplary districts doing? And sort of what are we looking for from our graduates? So that process is really just an examination Nothing is selected as part of that process. It is only reviewed, and in order for us to find our strengths and the gaps, right? So like, okay, now we know we sort of spent too much time on these 4 standards and we need to spend more time on these 6 standards. Or, we really don't have enough nonfiction. We need more nonfiction, and so forth. Then the next stage is develop, and that's what Natalia was just talking about, their stage of actually going through the potential resources. Okay, so there's an anthology for 10th grade that we think maybe we want to use, but there are 3 different publishers. Bring the publishers in, evaluate it using a rubric. The teachers decide, what do we want to recommend? We bring it to the board. That is sort of that process of development, the actual deciding, okay, well, how many units are we going to have? And what order are we going to teach them? How long are they? What are our guaranteed resources for those units? All of that happens during the development part of the cycle. And then we have implement 1. So the first try at implementing, and that's where we really plan, communicate, engage in professional development, and give it a try, right? We start it, implementation. Most of the research says there's a 3-year implementation to really have a full, secure implementation of something. But the first year, you're doing your best, you're using your training, you're using the new resources. We use that time to gather more information from teachers and students about how it's working, looking at test scores. Okay, how are we doing? Implement 2 is just, do we need to make any adjustments? We change the pacing sometimes. We say, all right, we're not going to do all 10 units, we're going to do 9 units, that kind of thing. And then the final 2 years, we monitor. We just see, how's it going? Is it continuing to have the impact we think it should? Are any changes needed? And then, before you know it, it's time to audit again. And you can't see it necessarily because we didn't capture every single one because Sandy's little loom picture is in the way there. But we do this for every curricular area. So we do this, each year brings a new curriculum review. And we've divided it because our elementary teachers teach all of those subjects, right? They teach many of them, most of them teach, at least 2 of them, if not all 4 of them. So we try not to give them a new curriculum every year to have something new, and we try and create some pause for them. And so far, we've been through this cycle as it is one full time. And so we knew that as we had gone through it, there might be things we wanted to change about the cycle before we restarted it again. And we're restarting it this fall with English Language Arts. There are 2 sort of off-color columns there in case you can't read it. The 2021 says pause for pandemic. I do like an alliteration. I don't like that was the reason we needed it. And then we also paused the cycle this school year, and you've been hearing reports because we wanted to focus on modernizing our assessments so that when we went back into curriculum auditing and developing, we knew we were looking for modern assessments that would promote modern ways of student learning so that we are really preparing kids to enter the world that they will enter and not the world that we entered when we went to school. So those were the 2 sort of pause points that we took, and now we are starting again. And Sandy's going to talk to you a little bit about a little shift. We learned a little bit from how special ed has had some success here, and she is proposing the use of some additional resources for the audit. Thank you, Chris.
As we're a district that is continuously improving, we have a curriculum audit cycle, which can be found on our website. 2022 to the 2023 year was a year to pause the cycle and do a deeper dive in the work of our Preparing Contemporary Citizens goal and our focus of modernizing assessment. That committee is developing a progression of competencies, which will be incorporated in our 23-24 ELA audit. The last time we did an ELA or English Language Arts audit was in 2016 to 17. And our teachers and curriculum department performed the audit ourselves. This year, we're proposing that the English Language Arts audit be conducted by the Delaware County Intermediate Unit in collaboration with our School District of Haverford Township teachers and the curriculum department. We saw the success of the special education and gifted audits and thought that an outside group will bring a greater objectivity and a wider perspective. As you will remember, we're the same people who did the audit 7 years ago, and we chose the curriculum materials that we've been using and revising ever since. As this is our second time through, we want to have an impartial view of our current curriculum and resources so that we can make sure to provide the best curriculum available for our students. We requested a proposal from both the Chester County Intermediate Unit and the Delaware County Intermediate Unit and received very similar descriptions of services. After ensuring that the proposals included the steps outlined in our own audit process, we selected the DCIU, or Delaware County Intermediate Unit, as it was more cost-effective and about half the cost of almost the same services from the CCIU. The DCIU is qualified for this work as it has conducted over 20 audits of literacy, English language arts, math, MTSS, behavior, social emotional learning, and other audits. So how will this audit be the same and differ from the prior audit? This table is a list of steps that we traditionally follow when conducting a curriculum audit. As you can see, there are many opportunities during the audit for the teachers and curriculum staff to collaborate in the ELA audit. Although the DCIU will take the lead, teacher representatives will be involved with the curriculum review and gap analysis. Teachers will be actively involved in comparing the resources and novels they use with a rubric reviewing resources from a lens of text complexity and rigor, diversity and inclusion, age appropriateness, and as it continues to meet the PA grade level standards. The curriculum team will be involved in developing the survey questions for teachers, parents, and guardians, and students. Representative teachers and curriculum staff will conduct a review of our own test results, course enrollment, and prerequisites and recommendation criteria. Externally, the DCIU will share the research they're reading about best practices so teachers may read the same research so that they can stay informed. Haverford teachers and curriculum will join the DCIU in collecting information from other exemplary districts to compare our curriculum and resources against a comparative benchmark. So here you can see our next steps. First, we're going to bring the proposal to the board on July 20th for approval. We'll then conduct the audit, completing the steps outlined tonight. We plan to be finished by the spring of 2024, and we'll be sure to return to you with updates along the way. We're excited to begin this process. For your reference, we've also listed here the steps that we will follow in the 24-25 school year. As you can see, we have a busy plan ahead. As we're a district that has continued.
All right. So all Sandy said at the end there was thank you and send any questions to me, or if we have questions that I can't answer, she'll be happy to answer them upon her return. I did ask, thank you, Chris, for going back to this spot here. I just wanted folks to see, I'm not sure the video left on this frame for quite as long as you might have needed to absorb. This is the next step then. So we're talking about auditing, right, which is sort of looking at us, looking at what it should be and finding where we should go next. And then the development piece will happen the following year. That is not something we will employ the DCIU or anyone else for. That is internal work that we do as a district. Just so everybody's clear on sort of what role we're looking for. And it really is the same thing that Natalia has experienced with the Delaware County IU, and we also had a gifted program audit. We used the Chester County IU for that. They've been very successful. It's been helpful having someone from like a fresh set of eyes look at it with our teachers and be able to provide some outside perspective. And then we're the ones who make the decisions about what to do with that information. So at this point, are there any questions from the board? Yeah.
Just a clarifying question.
Sure.
The table that had like the DCIU and the
Yes.
SDHT comparison. So the SDHT, that is what we did. Those were the steps, actions we took. This is not like if we did it ourselves, this is what we would do. This is like when we did it in 2016.
When we did in 2016, we did all of these
Okay.
steps by ourselves
Okay.
with no involvement.
Okay.
What you see here with the green, thank you for asking the clarification there, is what what if we go with this proposal from the DCIU, how it will look next school year.
Okay, great. And so it seems like the big gain here, well, besides the fact that this is a very heavy lift and like having experts, you know, doing this, and also the sort of the objectivity of it. It seems like the big piece we would be getting from having the IU do this instead of us is the parent, guardian, students, focus groups, and we have talked a lot about student voice and how we value student voice. So I think that it seems like that would be an asset, right? There would be an opportunity for students specifically to weigh in on, you know, their thoughts. So I appreciate that aspect of it, because running those focus groups and running those surveys is a lot of work. And so having that from the IU would be really useful, I think.
It is helpful, and we sent out surveys. We actually got a really good return on our first survey from families and everything. I think that was before we started sending a lot of them out. But we did conduct surveys in the past, and then like Sandy and I held focus groups with middle school students, and we sent out a high school student survey. So it will be nice to also have, that's always nice when someone from the district can do it, but sometimes people are more comfortable talking to someone who is not in the district about any criticism or any experiences they've had, so we wanted to sort of be able to offer that opportunity as well.
And I could see that being useful for the teachers as well, that, they're imparting this information to sort of an objective third party, and so maybe that, would solicit some more feedback than maybe we would get. So.
Right, exactly. But we do want the teachers to have input, and curriculum folks to have input into, like, what are the focus questions of the focus groups, and what are the survey questions. So we'll be sure that that's something that we all have some input into.
And it is full K-12, just for my board report, full K-12, so it's the entire ELA curriculum for general education.
Yes, and you will see it in the form of 2 proposals from the IU. They're going to have an elementary proposal and then a secondary proposal. I believe they are both around 11,000.
Okay,
yes. Whereas the IU's total, the CCIU's total was around, I think, 39,000.
Okay.
So, yeah.
For the gifted audit?
For this same work. Yeah.
I have another question about,
Sure.
Let me go back to that slide again.
You want the check marks?
Yes.
Yeah.
So is a part of what the DCIU may provide, is it providing some sort of consulting service where teachers, admin, staff can also walk away with some training in terms of how they can better serve and or use the data?
So I'm glad you asked that question, because this was really important to us, that conducting audits is not only about the work that's produced, it's about the learning that occurs along the way, right?
Yeah.
And so we didn't want to hand that learning over to someone else. And quite frankly, like, our teachers are good and they are experts in what they do. And so, like, you can't just hand something to them if they haven't seen the research or gone through the evaluation themselves, right? It's not going to fly, and I'm happy about that. So we wanted to make sure that, we are a part of that learning and process through the whole thing. So, for example, when we're talking about looking at the sequential program review by content area, we asked the IU, okay, but like, against what? Against best practice for curriculum writing, which will include understanding by design and universal design for learning. So there will be an opportunity for teachers to say, okay, this is sort of the framework they're comparing our curriculum against, and this is what that means, and this is what a sound curriculum will have, and this is how it will address those things, and there's some learning, and now we can all look for that in our own curriculum, and we can look for that as in the next step we look for potential resources. So yes, it was very important that we still get the learning out of it.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Sure.
So I think a lot of the questions I have for you tonight are more under the novel about
Yes, which I do have under the info items.
but
Yes.
just to clarify, so quick question, is this kind of the trend that we're seeing where you said before we did this on our own the last cycle? Is this what now more districts are doing? I'm just curious, using an outside agency for their audits?
I don't know if there's been a recent uptick. I know we as a district have, for the first time, really started, since I've been here, not the first time ever, the first time since I've been here, have started using some of these resources. We do hear a lot from when we go to our monthly DCIU curriculum director meeting. We hear about how other districts are using the resources at the Delaware County IU to take a look at lessons, take a look at programs, take a look at curriculum. So it's certainly something we hear about more than I used to.
Okay.
And there are several districts in our county who have also used the IU for this kind of work.
And ultimately, they'll present recommendations. Who the final say will go to the school district, I would assume, with their...
Yeah. And what I like about using them for an audit is that they basically say, listen, as outsiders, we looked at your stuff, and here's what we see, and here's what we think that you should prioritize. And then we say, thank you very much. and then we decide, of those priorities, yes, we think 7 of those 8 are things that we can do and we agree and work for our community. Or we could say, what, of those, we would prioritize these differently or something like that. But right, it's really
still
just
teacher
the
voice.
exam.
They're still-
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And they're not a part of the actual development then. You know what I mean? Like they're just sort of saying, this is what we see, and then we decide what we want to do.
Okay, no, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
If I could just follow up.
Yeah.
In terms of the intermediate units, just in general, I think there's 25 IUs around the state, and they're independent. They provide a full range of services, not just what we're looking at here today. All kinds of administrative services and purchasing services. And one of the benefits of being involved with the IU is that they've had exposure to this same process with not just all 15 districts that are in Delaware County, but the IUs have they share information amongst themselves. So in terms of identifying best practices and sharing the pitfalls and the warnings and things to watch out for, they have a much broader pool, that they can bring to the table as part of the process. So we've used the DCIU for many things over the years, ranging from health insurance consortium to purchasing fuel as a group to get efficiencies, and this is just another part of the services that they provide.
No, thank you, that was very helpful. I'm sorry.
And I was just going to comment, it sounds very much like this proposal is similar to what the special education audit has been, because we've seen that entire process where it started with them gathering materials from us and asking us questions as a district, and then they did the internal pieces with the interviews of teachers and students and parents, and then they did the external with like what's going on out in the field, and then it sounds like the next step is bring it back to us, and then that's where the teachers get involved and like, okay, so comprehension, here's the 10 best resources available for comprehension, let's review them, and then here's the recommendations that we have, and then that would come to us.
That's exactly right.
Especially when they need the money, that's when they come to us.
Right. Exactly, right.
So, so it sounds very much like this proposal would be similar to that we've kind of seen play out over the past year.
Right. Yep, exactly.
I think they would be really helpful too, for the public to describe it. Sandy said that throughout the process, the board and the public will be updated. And so what does that look like? When can we expect updates? What will, what types of things will come, in front of the board? I don't think we'll be voting on anything for the next year or so, but sort of, what do those updates look like, and sort of what is the timeline, like periodically when we would get those?
Sure. Usually we will do at least one mid-year update, and then either March or April, sort of a spring update. The mid-year update in the past, we've been at least able to share the internal, and you've seen our presentation. So we share like the graphs from the actual surveys, and we share the, this is the table, and this is the thing we were looking for, and this is the thing the teacher said we had and didn't have. And, so we just sort of share, this is what we've collected so far. And then in the spring, it's okay, we told you what we collected so far, here's the further collections, and now here's, our overall takeaway from it is that we need more of this or more of that, or as we're evaluating, we're gonna look for resources that can do A, B, or C. So typically twice a year you would hear, and then after that we would come back again and say, okay, here are the resources we're starting to look at, and then we would bring actual rubrics for you to see, like teachers have filled out rubrics, and these are the resources we think we want to use, and ask for your approval to purchase those resources and use them.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions about that? Yeah, sure.
If possible, and it may not be possible, on the slide where, the second slide where it's the Let's Celebrate, I know you mentioned that this information is available for the public to access.
Yeah.
Is it possible for us to include
Like the website or
the
the
link
source?
or a reference or
Yeah.
source? That way it's just
Sure.
very clear where the information came from, and if there's any sort of directions that need to be included with how to actually get to our information, that'd be helpful.
Sure.
Thank you.
That's slide 2, right?
Yes, slide 2.
Got it.
That is exciting though. I feel like we like buried the lead. That's high. That's good.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
It looks, yeah, and I mean, if you, listen, and I will say this, I heard a principal use this analogy, I think it's such a good one. You know, he said he thinks of it like okay, I don't know a lot about it, so forgive me if I get it wrong. The NCAA tournament, apparently, like college, they have basketball tournaments, and right? I've heard about March Madness. I've heard about these things, right? So, there are typically, like, there are schools that pretty much make it into the Sweet 16 just about every time, right? And sometimes that school doesn't make it, and it's a big deal, and everybody can't figure it out. And sometimes there's that, like, Cinderella story where there's this little school that makes it into the Sweet 16. And so this principal's analogy, I thought was a good one, sounded right to me from what I know, was that, like, basically, Haverford is one of those that typically gets into the Sweet 16 that you sort of expect would be there. You know, listen, that's not every year, but it's sort of, you know, is a longitudinal process, and that's generally where we land. You know, we of course, I'd love to see us, you know, number 1 on there. I'm not gonna like, but it's nice to have a celebration. Always nice. Teachers are working very hard. Administrators, students, families are working very hard. So where we can celebrate, we like to.
Yeah, big congrats to the students and the teachers. I know that I haven't personally been through a Keystone student yet, but I know PSSAs have been a big deal for the past few years in my house, so good job.
Yep. Good news. All right, great. So, excuse me. So we are now on to our information items portion of the agenda. And just in looking at the order we have them here, I think the second one's going to take 1 minute and the third one's going to take longer, or the next one's going to take longer. So I'm going to flip them. Just as, again, an information item, you've heard us talk about ESSER funding and the fact that ESSER funding concludes next year. At September of 24 is the last time you can spend ESSER funding. We've been telling you a little bit about we've been telling you how it's been spent throughout. A lot of the money's been spent on interventionists, on in-school tutoring, out-of-school tutoring, summer school resources, supporting students who are habitually truant, you know, just a variety of ways that we're trying to help students close any gaps that were existed or exacerbated by the pandemic. And so we're in our final year of spending, and we would like to thank the board for your support of the MTSS program by adding 2 of the 5 interventionist positions into the budget. So now we only need to budget from ESSER funds for 3 of those interventionist positions. We believe that the data shows us the next place to make sure that we pay some attention is at middle school math. And so with some of the ESSER funding that is now available due to the district taking on some of the other expense, we are going to have a 1 year, because you only have 1 year left to spend the money, a 1 year math coach / specialist at the middle school. It is an internal posting. We hope to identify a current teacher who is interested in doing this work. That person will work with the middle school math teachers to help them with math curriculum, math instruction. They will be available for some support of students as well, although we don't want to develop a system that requires that, because then that position won't exist the year after that. Well, our goal is to build the capacity of all teachers of math so that we can really make sure that students are continuing to excel there at the middle level. Nationally, that's where the gaps occurred. And so, you know, we are happy to be able to use the ESSER funding for that support next year. We wanted to make you guys aware of that.
Is there a particular math? Is it just all the math courses, or is it like a particular area of math, I guess, a particular math course or area?
We're looking at all 3 grades. We will look at our PSSA data and our PVOS data to make sure. Last year, middle school math, you know, the PVOS was really good. So, but we will definitely use the data to make sure we focus those efforts. We also take study island assessments at the end of the year, so it can help us target if there are particular classes or particular curriculum areas with like standards and things that we need to look at. So we'll just use the data to guide us. Any other questions about that piece? Okay. I do, the next piece is the role of the consultant in the novel review process. For those of you who were able to watch the last school board meeting, Mrs. Vitale asked the district to prepare some remarks regarding the role of Sage Wellness, in particular, a consultant, in the, I can't remember exactly the phrasing, but the removal of To Kill a Mockingbird from the 8th grade core curriculum. And I did prepare some remarks for that, of course, open to questions. I'm hoping to, share the remarks first and then answer whatever questions I can and gather any questions that I don't have answers to and find the answers to share with folks there. So we'll take a couple minutes to do that now. First of all, I just want to say I'm happy to respond to that question. And I appreciate the wording of that question because it's about the curriculum piece of it. And it's not about the availability of the text at large. So just for clarity for anyone watching or anyone who is interested, the book To Kill a Mockingbird is still in our libraries. It still exists. Students are not prevented from reading it. I can just say I remember talking to a family this summer who said, can my kid read this for summer reading? He said, of course, yes, by all means, if that's your choice, feel free to do that. But we are here to talk about the process that we used to make the decision not to use it as part of the core curriculum for the past couple of years. Also, I would like to just reassure folks that we don't, and I said this part before, but we don't dispute the merit of the book To Kill a Mockingbird. I'm a former English teacher. I love literature of all kinds, so I certainly, we can certainly talk about all the good things that come from that as well as many other novels. Nor do we dispute the importance of addressing the topics that it brings to bear. We don't, as anyone who has sent a child through our schools would know from the curriculum that they've experienced, we don't shy away from challenging topics like classism, racism, civil rights, any of those things. And we remain, I want to just reassure folks that we remain committed to that as we embark on this ELA audit, as was just described, right? That we want to make sure that, looking at novels is a way for students to learn about some of those really tough topics. So we do remain committed to that. First, I'm just going to share a general summary that sort of responds to the question, and then I'll provide a little additional context. I'll provide additional context. And again, whatever questions you have, I'm happy to try and answer too. In general summary to the response of the role of Sage Wellness, the short answer is we consulted with Sage Wellness so that they could lend some support around the culturally proficient practices that exist and available to educators. It was not their role to weigh in on whether or not this or any other novel was a part of our curriculum. That was not their role. As I'll describe, as we moved further into our exploration, we were hoping that Sage Wellness could help us analyze our practice from the lens of cultural proficiency, as well as structure some forums and some surveys that would gain more input from students and parents and guardians. While the pandemic prevented us from completing all of the aspects of that plan, representatives from Sage Wellness did meet with our teachers and administrators and provide some support to the process. I'd also like to note that as we prepared our response to this question, we reached out to the teachers who were there, who are still in our district, just to be sure we weren't missing any steps or there wasn't anything we were forgetting, and to try and represent their perspectives as well. And in doing so, they shared some information that we knew and was good and matched up with what we knew. And they also shared some new information about their experiences that I found disappointing. Not disappointing that they shared it, but disappointing that was their experience. And so, the teachers themselves have expressed a willingness to talk through that a little bit more and give us a little bit more information now that they feel, like that it's a good time to share that. And we really are looking forward to doing that. So we have reached out, we're asking about, when that might work for folks. As always, listen, I think you've heard us say it a bunch of times, we're always open to learning something from whatever processes we engage in, and we believe that we can do that from this as well. So we'll look forward to that conversation as well as continued conversations as part of the audit process. Now I'll just provide a little bit more context around the role of Sage Wellness in the whole process. First, just want to say it's not uncommon in education to access expertise from consultants. We do so periodically through professional development providers, auditors, and curriculum and instruction experts. You may remember several years ago, as our belonging work was first developing, that we began to work with Dr. Crystal Lucky from Villanova. She provided some consultation and professional development for English language arts and social studies teachers about teaching tough topics. And that was very well reviewed, and folks wanted to hear some more from her, and she did some work with some specific groups as well. Other consultants and professional development facilitators that we've worked with over the past years, I won't give you a full list, but they include representatives from the IU, nationally known authors, professors from local universities, as well as Sage Wellness. While some of this work is larger and large enough in scope to require their agreement to be board approved, not every agreement meets that threshold. However, we do share overviews of the work that we're engaging in with these folks to the board through curriculum and instruction and professional development updates that occur throughout the year, like what we just discussed there. Prior to this work of looking at this text, our district had engaged with Sage Wellness for professional development and workshops that focused on a sense of belonging. And that professional development was geared for teachers, but we also, I think they offered 2 parent workshops in that year as well that happened in the evening around that area, that same topic of belonging. Just to remember, that's sort of at the beginning of our district's focus on belonging and all of our efforts to ensure that each student feels a sense of belonging in our buildings. So just placing this a little in time, it was about late spring of 2019, if we can think back that far. Building administrators had heard from several students objecting to offensive language and themes that were included in the novel as they were reading it. That novel continued to be taught that year. Building administrators, brought those student sentiments to the attention of district administrators. And at that point, district administrators just made sure the teachers knew that students had said something and let the teachers know, this is not something we're going to change what we're doing right now. We can talk about it further in the fall. They don't even typically teach it until the spring or February. They start teaching it usually. So over the summer, some district administrators began researching how and if that particular novel, To Kill a Mockingbird, is taught across the area as well as across the nation, and what supports or maybe companion texts are being provided for teachers and students. This was done internally. There was no support from consultants, Sage Wellness or otherwise on that. No decisions were made regarding removing the text at that point. Teachers were aware that we were exploring this, and even one teacher does report that when she was asked at back to school night whether we would teach the text, she did respond with, that the decision hasn't yet been made whether or not in the 2019-20 school year it would be taught. It was not long after that we began to involve Sage Wellness because, teachers need to know what they're teaching, right? And so we invited them to a discussion with the teachers so that we could learn more about how we were currently teaching the text and how we were teaching the surrounding context for the text. Again, Sage Wellness's role there was to provide perspective around cultural proficiency, not to advise on whether or not the novel should be required reading. And I believe that the teachers also mentioned that at that meeting there was no interaction from Sage Wellness saying anything about that as well. Following that group conversation, we wanted to allow teachers to have the opportunity to share their perspectives and experiences individually. Sometimes it's, teaching is personal, right? Like this is like you're putting your heart and soul into this. And sometimes after you've had a group discussion, you're going to have an individual reflection and want to have maybe more to share, less to share, whatever it is. So we wanted them to have an opportunity to do that individually. So Sage Wellness developed a set of reflective questions, and the teachers were provided time to respond to those questions, keeping in mind that cultural proficiency lens about, really they were reflecting about their own comfort level, the topics that were covered, perspectives that were covered, and the history and current events that were covered in relation to teaching the novel. At this point, it was still determined that we would teach the novel in the 1920 school year. So nobody was making a decision to change anything at that point. After the individual reflection, Sage Wellness was then did meet with the teachers without administrators present. The intent of that meeting was to debrief on those individual reflections and just share, sort of what they thought might be helpful next steps for looking at the cultural proficiency lens. After that, Sage Wellness talked to building and district administrators, but they didn't attribute any specific comments to any specific teachers. We sort of didn't want teachers to feel like they couldn't say whatever it was they wanted to say because they had, we wanted to give them the opportunity to say it to the consultant, the outside person, as opposed to the district or building administrators. I will say that we have just learned through this process that while the teachers really did participate wholeheartedly, they were really great about it, they did feel the questions were focused in a way that did not allow truly open reflection. Now that we know that they felt that way, we'll have the ability to learn more about that from them when we meet, as we talked about, as I talked about there in the beginning. There was then discussion about using this year's unit, this year being the 2019-20 year, as like a learning lab experience that sometimes happens where we could like observe the lessons, we could explore what resources are out there and just continue the discussions regarding the use of the novel. It became clear as we were all discussing all of these aspects of this novel that we really would benefit from a more defined process. Whenever you're looking at a system like this, it's very important to think about a process because every time something is true for one element of a system, it can also be true for another element of a system. And it's helpful to develop a process so that you can say, oh, well, how did we evaluate it last time? And let's apply those same principles and steps this time so that we are doing it in a way that is fair. Not to say that we wouldn't revise it if it didn't work out the last time we did it, but just really thinking along those lines. And it became clear that, this may be the case for any other novel outside of a review or outside of a curriculum cycle process. So in January of 2020, as part of one of those bi-yearly curriculum audit updates, I presented a slide with a sort of initial process to the board and to the public. At that time, I did refer to the use of consultants and Sage Wellness in particular, just so folks knew that that was a part of what we were saying could be an initial process. That initial process included identifying a novel, if there were a novel that had to be evaluated, surveying local districts, researching whatever national trends and publications have to say, meeting with consultants as necessary, teachers and administrators, conducting teacher surveys and follow-ups, conducting observations, collecting lessons and unit materials, consultant maybe facilitating some focus groups, as we mentioned before, and then as a team considering all those recommendations and then devising an action plan. District administrators did meet with the teachers after that board meeting where all of that was shared and just said this is the information that we presented and wanted to make sure you had it. It was an opportunity to review the plan. We're now in January. They usually start teaching in February. It's an opportunity to sort of review the plan. Okay, does everybody have their materials? Here's how we're going to do this learning lab thing and figure out what we needed to do next. So after the board presentation and meeting with the teachers, Sage Wellness then submitted a proposal in support of a couple of steps that they felt like they could be helpful in the process. I'm going to list those right now for you. Not all the services were able to be provided, and I'll talk about that, as we go through the list here. One of the items was the creation and analysis of those teacher questions. That's sort of like check that had already been done. They wanted to make sure it was documented there. Another item was the creation of guiding questions for educators to use when teaching the novel. That was not produced by them, although it was proposed as an idea. It was not produced by them, and we did not use anything along those lines. Individual coaching sessions with educators was also on the list. We did not take them up on individual. The teachers met as a group with them. Meetings with administration, we did have a couple of those, occurred sort of periodically throughout the year. Also on the list, workshops with students, which would have been those focus groups, workshops with parents or guardians, again, focus groups. Neither of those were completed. due to timing, and we'll talk about that in a minute, and then an educator debrief that would have followed the focus groups so that they could hear, okay, here's what we heard from the focus groups, and make sure everybody was aware of that. And then, if necessary, the creation of any literature for families about taking an equity approach to the novel. We did not have that step completed either. I'll talk a little bit later about the circumstances, although everybody knows the timing of this, that prevented those things from taking place. So this proposal was reviewed by the district and the building administrators, but we recently learned that although we shared the process that was talked about at the board meeting with the teachers don't recall us reviewing the actual proposal, and they were unaware of it. I think this is a missed opportunity. Like, if we were going to do this again, I would want to make sure that the teachers got to see that proposal. So that's one of those, like, definitely things to learn from, to not have it happen that way again. So in February and March, the teachers proceeded with teaching the unit. And while Sage Wellness did provide sort of a list of cultural proficiency practices, which were a lot of student engagement kinds of questions, a checklist that was shared with the teachers, we specifically noted to the teachers we didn't expect them to change any practices, because we were really just trying to learn more about how the students were experiencing the novel as it was usually taught. We weren't looking to make changes at that point, just do some more learning. Building and district administrators observed lessons being taught in each of the classes. Feedback regarding high levels of student engagement was given to the teachers, and the teachers also had the opportunity to share some positive feedback they had received from students regarding the novel, which was really great. Sage Wellness did not participate in the observations. That was only building and district administrators. So as we know, excuse me, school buildings closed on March 13th of 2020. At this point, students were almost finished with the novel, and the teachers proceeded to teach the last 50 pages or so as part of what we call flexible learning at the time. I sort of have a little eye twitch that happens when I say the words flexible learning, but we did talk about that. Sort of teachers asked, like, should we continue the book? You know, the students are now at home, and we came to the conclusion that yes, we wouldn't want the kids to not be able to finish the text itself. They were already only 50 pages away. So they did that, and teachers got them through that, even in a different learning environment that we were all adjusting to. So just after those school building closures, we asked Sage Wellness if they could produce a draft of questions for maybe a student survey, because we weren't going to be able to do forums because nobody was getting together at that time. Nobody really had Zoom down pat, where we felt like people had a level of comfort sharing things on Zoom yet. So we were thinking, okay, maybe we can do a student survey. But, given the challenges of delivering instruction and the new world that we were all adjusting to at that time, it did not seem like the right point to give a student survey. Students were just grappling with, like, trying to hold on to the last year, the last part of the year there, as well as teachers. And so we decided not to give it at that time. The teachers have since expressed, which is, I'm sort of glad it worked out that way, because the teachers have since expressed now through this process that they would be concerned about the wording of those questions in a way that was truly open-ended and not leading to an outcome. So, that now gives us an opportunity to make sure that teachers are involved in, drafting those questions or reviewing drafts of those questions so that they can be a part of that as well. So as I mentioned before, we were unable to complete all of the steps of that novel review process that we brought to the board, but we were able, and that was due to the COVID closures. We needed to really focus our resources as a district on teaching and learning in that new context. We did, however, complete a couple of those steps, and they were the surveying of local districts, the research of the national trends, meeting with the consultant by teachers and administrators, the teacher reflection questions, and the observations, as well as collecting unit and lesson materials that we reviewed together as teachers and administrators. So in the months of April and May, after the book had concluded, teachers requested further discussion and a final decision regarding whether or not we would continue teaching the novel the next year. In mid-June, central administrators consulted with the superintendent, who expressed that the case would need to be made to her that this text is the only way students could learn these standards and these themes in order to continue teaching it next year. Now, I'm going to insert some dates here only to help paint the picture. of what was happening in education at that point. That June 15th, I met with the teachers to express Dr. Rushi's sentiments. I explained that I couldn't make that argument in good faith, but if the teachers wanted to speak with the superintendent, they could do so. If not, we would work together to develop a unit using different resources that can still address those same themes. We discussed the possibilities of doing so. Based on that conversation, what they heard from me at that conversation and their experience of the process, the teachers ultimately decided not to petition the superintendent. They have expressed that they felt like it was not necessarily something that was going to come to fruition if they did petition the superintendent, and so they wanted to move forward and start working on the next thing. The next board meeting was 3 days later, and the following and all subsequent board meetings, I think for at least the next 12 months and maybe longer, folks here I'm sure would remember, really focused on creating health and safety plans, developing Haverford online, hearing from medical professionals, designing hybrid learning, keeping up to speed on changing requirements and recommendations from various departments of health. And as we mentioned before, we did pause the curriculum review cycle during that time period as we were adjusting to hybrid learning and other curriculum adjustments that needed to be made. As they were not teaching that particular text the next year, the teachers spent part of their summer reading alternate texts and determining what might be appropriate novels to pilot that would still address those themes and be at the correct levels of complexity and be appealing to students and all of those things. In an effort to support them with the cultural proficiency lens of this work, additional meetings with Sage Wellness consultants were arranged for the spring of 21, which is sort of helping them develop the unit prior to having to teach it. And while the goal of these meetings was to provide support, we have again now, as part of this process, learned that those meetings were not implemented as we as administrators intended, nor was the consultant's approach in line with what was intended as the district. This is something we're very eager to learn more about from the teachers, and they have expressed a willingness to share more details. So we are looking forward to the time that we can get together and do that. We have not engaged with Sage Wellness for this work since that time. Just for some clarity, in the subsequent school years, students in grade 8 have been reading the following novels: The Pearl by Steinbeck, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, 12 Angry Men, The House on Mango Street, Brown Girl Dreaming, Outliers, almost all read Outliers, Outsiders, and for some, Tuesdays with Maury. So it still remains a robust reading list, and that is sort of what has occurred up until now when we can re-engage in our ELA curriculum audit, which now affords us an opportunity to look again at To Kill a Mockingbird, as well as all the other potential resources out there. I recognize that was a lot of me talking, and this is a lot of information to process. I did want to provide some level of detail to the board in response to the questions posed, as well as provide some relevant content. I just want to reiterate what I stated at the beginning, that this, as with all processes, we always strive for continuous improvement. We look forward to talking to the teachers further on how we can improve and what next steps could help move us forward as a staff together. I also, we'll just say it one more time, Sandy jokes that she needs like a t-shirt that says there's a curriculum audit happening. I'll just remind everyone that we will be engaging in our ELA curriculum process this year. And I just want to assure everyone that To Kill a Mockingbird will absolutely be included in the list of potential resources for our secondary students. And it will definitely be a part of the evaluations, and we'll see, how it fits. And I know we've already had some teachers express some interest, and so we're looking forward to letting that process come to fruition as well. So that's sort of the general part of my comments. Again, open to whatever questions I can answer, or I'll write them down and we'll get back to them.
Don't apologize for talking so long, because I feel like I'm going to give you a run for your money.
Okay,
but
get ready. We're gonna
but I
double
do
it.
want to appreciate that you said at first that this, I think for a lot of for me, is not necessarily about the book. Honestly, if this was The Great Gatsby, I'd be here doing the same.
Sure.
I mean, it's about the process, the
Yes.
procedure, and the transparency. And and I have a lot of questions about the role of consultant in Sage Wellness, but I just have, the teachers sent me with, I believe, your blessing, the timeline. They emailed me today with their recollections. And I just have a question about something, because I was told by administration, and I had heard rumors of this, but now actually having it in writing, that it was 4 to 5 students who were uncomfortable with some of the language in the book. And I have here, spring 2019, it looks like 2 people, I don't know if the administration called 8th grade students from at least 2 specific 8th grade teachers down to talk to them about To Kill a Mockingbird while the book was being taught. These discussions included questions on their feeling of the use of the N-word in the book. So did 4 to 5 students come to administration, or did administration go to 4 to 5 students? Because that raised a lot of red flags for me as an administrator and as a parent. I mean, if I want certain answers, I can go to certain people and get it. I mean, that's just, I think I had a conversation with Antoinette. I have 2 friends, and if I want to do the right thing, I'll call my friend Janine. And if I want to cater to my worst impulse, I'll
Don't
call.
name that friend. Don't name
I
that
won't.
friend.
She knows who she is if she's watching. But she'll tell me, you should tell them what's what. And I will do that. And, so that, which was it that the students went to admin, or did the admin go to the students? And then were the parents contacted? Did they give permission? Because I know I personally wouldn't want my child pulled out of a lesson. I mean, it's one thing if it's a disciplinary or, safety, anything, or, but just to, on a pet project of a book, like I don't want my son being pulled out of a lesson. So do you know anything more about that?
I was not involved in that piece of it. I
Okay.
can only speculate, but, I can follow up. I will just say, having been, an elementary principal, there are certainly times when you might call students down to follow up on something that they have brought to you, and that could have occurred at various times throughout the day. But again, that's me speculating. I don't have.
Yeah, it just seems with the question they said about how they felt about the use of, I mean, I would say I'm uncomfortable with that. Like, I think you're going to get the answer you want. But all right, but we'll go back to Sage. I just think that needs to be followed up on. I think that's a concern I have. Okay, so I understand why a district would engage with consultants.
Sure.
New math program, new reading program, a literacy technique, maybe a whole workshop on technology use. But what it seems to me, this is a book that had been taught for years. The teachers were comfortable, very comfortable teaching. The teachers very much loved teaching this book from what they've told. Was there a need to bring somebody, just based on, I mean, what was that you had to go, that you couldn't even as a team with administration? What was your absolute, we need to find somebody else? I mean, it seems to me, I think you could have done this on me, that's the outside looking in. So what was your?
Yeah, I appreciate your confidence in us that we could do that on our own. I will say that it is, people are all over the country have grappled with this, as well as, looking at other texts. There are lots of complexities to determining whether or not to include this particular book, as well as other books, and how to do so. There's a changing landscape about what is going to help all of our students belong. We're learning more at the time about that. We're learning more about the fact that some weren't feeling that sense of belonging, and not only because of this, but of other curricular gaps or other curricular representations that they didn't feel were accurate or positive. So this was really, if you think back, it's several years ago. We were at the advent of looking at belongingness, at the advent of looking at cultural proficiency. And, I think it was at that time something that we were looking for someone who had done some work in the area of cultural proficiency to be able to provide that lens for us. We around the same time had called in some other folks to help with the kind of professional development, as opposed to giving it ourselves. Just as an example, with, as I mentioned, Dr. Lucky, people from the IU talking about mirrors, windows, and doors at professional development.
And Dr. Lucky, just so you know, staff actually speak very highly. They very much enjoyed. Sage, not so much. So can I ask how we found Sage Wellness? Because they're an out-of-state provider. How did they come into our orbit?
Yeah. So Sage Wellness did not come into our orbit for the purpose of this, but we did begin working with Sage Wellness. I won't quote the year. That probably that year or the year prior. There are other local districts that had worked with them and recommended them.
And so just based on recommendation from, that's how you.
for the work,
they
as a,
vetted?
for a different scope of work that I wasn't as directly involved in, but I do know that other districts had used them and.
Okay. I'm counting on the teachers' timelines. I mean, 6+ meetings that the ELA staff had with Sage Wellness. That seems a lot, because there's 4 at
Or
the
after,
end.
2
Yeah.
prior, yep, okay.
That seems a lot
That's
to me.
over from the 2019 through 2021.
Well, and I don't know how many, I mean, this is their timeline.
Yeah.
I don't have how many maybe administration, because they would not know that. If you as, Dr. Rushi or other administrators met with them, Ms. Connolly, I would not know that. But on this end, there's at least 6. Is that a typical amount to?
I don't know about typical, but yes, I mean, over a span of time like that, it would be helpful to continue to meet and not just sort of have a one and done meeting with something like that, depending on the scope of the work that
Okay.
needs to be done, yeah.
And I was kind of concerned, there seemed to be, one of the themes when I was reading through the teachers thing, they kept noting a lack of feedback given. And is there documentation? I mean, because, if we have an outside agency coming in, I would think they should be providing a report. Like if you get your child tutored, the tutor gives you a little, here, we worked on this, that, and the other thing. I mean, my son's even taking pitching lessons, and I get a little pitching mechanics thing. So if we're spending thousands of dollars, did they provide reports to the district after their meetings or trainings, whatever you want to call them?
So we did have debrief meetings that I sort of described, the one that we had after they had worked with individual questions, and then they talked to the teachers as a group, and then they debriefed with us. They didn't, the Sage Wellness didn't participate in the observations, so they wouldn't have been able to give feedback regarding that. And then really, that was the interaction they had with the teachers there. And then it was at the end, afterward, when they were trying to help provide a cultural proficiency lens on any new materials that they were going to use, that they had further meetings.
But did they give you any notes after their meetings with the teachers? Like the
We talked through it. We talked through it.
but there were no written.
I don't recall having written notes, but I do remember scheduling meetings so that we could talk through it, yes.
So I'm taking it from what the teachers wrote here. There was no administration present during they had 4, they said 90-minute meetings with Victorious Hall. So there was no, did someone check, I mean, so they gave to you, you're saying, a verbal debrief. Did anyone check in with those teachers afterwards from administration? Like, hey, I mean, even like the lead teacher, or I don't know how you describe the teachers, or one of the teachers there, hey, can you tell us your thoughts? Because that seems to be something that I'm picking up on, that it didn't happen, but maybe I just want to be clear. And that seems an important thing that should have happened in retrospect.
Yeah, certainly I agree with you that that's something that should have happened, and I don't want to say specifically that it did without having checked with building administration and other district administrators. So I can find out the answer to that question for you, for sure.
Because if the teachers they had to go to these meetings. It wasn't an optional thing. I would think, I'm not sure who set it up. Was it the middle school? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's hard to recollect. I believe
it was a while ago.
Yeah.
But someone, I would think, and going forward, someone, to make sure this kind of doesn't happen again, someone should be checking in when we have outside consultants. It's not just like Ms. Connolly's giving a little talk, Ms. Smith-Dells, that's a little bit different. But when we're paying an outside consultant who we just know as through their work with other districts, I really think, I hope to me, that's a really big take home. We need to be checking in on what their message is and what's going on with the teachers. Because reading through the notes today, I had heard a lot from a lot of, the entire ELA team, but multiple people at HMS, the faculty, and looking through these were quite shocking. And my take home was, the lack of feedback from Sage Wellness given to the teachers. They note that multiple times, that they went to these meetings and then
didn't hear anything.
And that's frustrating for a teacher. They're spending their time that they could be doing a lot of other things, and then to get no feedback. There's no feedback really, and then the district didn't seek feedback from the teachers. So that was like one of my things that I think going forward, that we really, I think that can be agreed upon, needs to be worked on. It seems like we devoted a whole lot of time to this, and I'm kind of the, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I don't necessarily agree with that, but the biggest take home is I think, the treatment of our teachers. I mean, reading through here, Jen, like, I mean, I had heard some things before, but I commend these teachers for putting it in writing and putting it out there. But I mean, they were made to go to a meeting with multiple meetings with Sage Wellness, with this man, Victorious Hall, and, you know, trying to explain why they loved the book, why they wanted to keep teaching it. And this man tells them, well, he's never read the book, but he knows, I know people who have, and they told me about it. I mean, I'm going to use that at some point in my life, but, and then he told them, and he didn't read it because he refused to read books by white authors. And then to me, I mean, he's a racist, bigot ends to anything that man has to say. There's nothing of value he has to say. If someone stood up there and said, we're not teaching Jewish authors in this district, I would stand up right now and I would walk out of this door. Pack up my bag and I would walk out. And I don't want to say that I blame, I'm not saying anything against the teachers, because I'm not getting paid to be up here. So I don't have to, my livelihood isn't on the line. Like, if this was my job to pay my mortgage, I guess I would have to sit through someone saying that they weren't gonna, that they won't read Jewish authors. I guess I would have to suck it up and swallow it and just rage on the inside. But I mean, these teachers, they described this meeting to me in a call as quote, extremely upsetting. They left with the message that I'm a racist. I want to say thank you for still teaching in the district to all of these women, because they're phenomenal educators, and they're very fearful to talk. I mean, this happened years ago, and we're hearing about this now, and that to me is reprehensible. And I think we need a lot of policy, like a lot of checks and balances in the future. I mean, this man's a racist charlatan. I mean, like, what he said to our teachers is, he was playing. Some of it just is nonsensical. They told me they played a Tribe Called Quest to prove that they didn't understand Black culture and they couldn't teach Black authors. And I'm like that. I'm furious for them, and I'm furious that we spent money on this. And I'm going to read what I thought to be the most. All throughout these meetings, we were under the impression, this is the teachers, the whole entire ELA team. All throughout these meetings, we were under the impression that we would be given tangible strategies to use to teach this novel and to navigate conversation in our classrooms, because he, meaning Victorious, stated that this book was, quote, taught in his schools by his teachers. In fact, Victorious spent the majority of these meetings telling us that Brown Girl Dreaming was all about systemic racism, and that was the lens from which we needed to teach the book. He kept stressing systemic racism and social injustice, and that we needed to teach our students about both. When we said that systemic racism was not a standard for ELA, he said it did not matter, and that if students felt badly by their part in systemic racism, that was fine. My jaw dropped, and I think these teachers need an apology. I think we need a complete audit of our use of consultants in this district. I am such a middle of the road person. I could not believe this. This is like something that I never would have believed unless I saw it with my own eyes. If I really would question it if even Larry was reading it next to him, like, he must have got that wrong. Sometimes you have to get smacked in the face with something to believe it. I mean, he told them they couldn't teach books by Black authors because they all had implicit bias. I think it's commendable that one of our teachers said so she could only teach a book by a white female author in her 40s, but he was unable to provide any response to that. This is, I think we need to have, at the very minimum, an apology to these teachers, and I think we need an audit of consultants, because I think if any point after that first meeting someone would have checked in with these educators, we could have maybe nipped this in the bud and offered them and then cut ties. But that this kept going on and on really troubles me. And again, I'm having these dates. They put these spring 21 over the course of April and May of 2021, and and it was just a simple question. I asked a simple question. I wasn't looking. I'll state over and over again. I mean, the book was not taught when my son was in 8th grade, and I was parents said at the time it was because it was a hybrid COVID year. I thought nothing of it, and I just asked a simple question at a conference. Oh, was it going to be taught? I had nothing else to ask. My kid was doing well, and I'm like, oh, it was just a filler question. And the rabbit hole that I went, this is very, very upsetting to me. And as I said to you and Dr. Rushi, our school district has some of the most phenomenal teachers. We are blessed with some men and women who go above and beyond. I think I said to you, I think 85% of the teachers my 3 sons have gone above and beyond. And the other 15 are just awesome. But maybe 85% are just super duper, oh my God, how did they do that? And if we lose those teachers, we have nothing. And if those teachers are unhappy, and that affects their work, affects our children. And I think, sometimes we're not focusing on the right things. And I got this after this, I didn't get this till this morning. And, and I have all my kids at home, and I can't even begin to process to you. I knew some of this, but even hearing someone in our staff, and I don't know who it is, it's redacted, but when one of the teachers in just a Haverford meeting, this is what I'm taking it doesn't seem like it has Sage Wellness, shared her thoughts on the book. This teacher was called a racist for defending why she wanted to teach To Kill a Mockingbird. Come on, we talk about the teacher crisis all the time, teachers leaving. I think anyone who reads this, I could see why, and it's really, it breaks my heart, because I know some teachers who left the district, and I worry about these ones who came forward. I hope to God there's no repercussions against them for just speaking their truth, and I worry about that, and I think something needs to be done to audit our consultant process, because I think at this point we can't just say other districts use them. I'll be honest, I don't think that's good enough.
Well, I have to say, Ms. Vitale, I share your shock, and I can't even, disappointment is not strong enough. Because we've asked these questions now, we are learning about this. We were not aware of that at the time, and we would not have continued any further meetings if we had been aware of that. And I recognize that, and while I don't want to say that no one at the building checked in, or anyway, I don't know, I will get back to you with that, but I fully recognize that as
in my heart of hearts, Jen, I believe you and Dr. Rushi had no idea that this was, totally.
It's not acceptable. It's not what we asked for. It was supposed to be support that helped teachers have a culturally proficient lens on the new texts that they were considering piloting to try and teach these same themes that would have some student interest, et cetera. It's not what the district wants for its students. It's not how we would want our teachers to be treated. And I am grateful that it has come to surface now, because at least now we can attempt to make some repair that way. We do have the information now. We can investigate it. I will be going back and finding out, whatever I can more about those interactions, and working with those teachers. We certainly are thankful that they really did provide the information. We asked them, we wanted to make sure we weren't missing anything. We said, hey, I don't want to just present one side of this. What do you remember? What would you change? And they, as you said, were willing to share it. When they asked if they could share it with, a person who inquired, we said, we would not want you to not share information you want to share. This is new information for us. We want to talk about it. We want to figure out how to fix it and how to move forward. This is not acceptable, what we heard, and is not what we would want our teachers to go through or be a part of. My regret is that we didn't know about it at the time. Now we know, and we can do something, and certainly I think it's clear that we did not continue to work with them, and we have not continued to work with them. And we will certainly be, I think your idea too about sort of just looking at the consultants that we're using and having, as I mentioned before, the importance of having a process, because it could come up again in a system, right? So what's the system for evaluating a consultant? to use for this. I
Absolutely.
mean, there are so many lessons learned, so many things that we need to.
We can't
to
go
work
back
on.
in time,
Yeah,
obviously, but if we could
yeah.
take something, yeah, and I think they would be the take-homes to me, really vetting consultants, getting feedback along the way from the consultants and from the teachers.
too.
I mean, that's, and thank you, I mean, if
Mm-hmm.
they're watching, thank you. I mean, they do a phenomenal job each and every day with our students. They have a lot on their plate now, I think, more than ever, and their honesty and their bravery in putting this out there, thank you, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
And thank you for raising the question. I think it's important. You know, we say all the time that we're interested in continuous improvement, and sometimes it's great to come from a place where, hey, things are going pretty well and we're going to improve, and sometimes you learn that things did not go the way you wanted them to go, and they really require some improvement, and so we are going to learn from that as well. Any other questions or comments
Just ask a
regarding
couple
that?
of follow-up
Sure.
questions.
Mhm.
So while To Kill a Mockingbird is being paused,
Mhm.
I don't know a lot about 8th grade
Yeah.
ELA curriculum, so I'm
Yeah.
not intimately familiar with a lot of these novels.
Sure.
I do know To Kill a Mockingbird, and the major themes in that are dealing with race and racism, among many other
Yeah.
topics. So while pausing that, are there other books that have that, you know, so we're not backing away from dealing with these difficult topics and teaching students about, you know, some of these difficult topics, while also, you know, meeting the curricular goals of ELA. So what other books do we have that kind of fill that role?
Yeah, one of the books that fills that role is A House on Mango Street,
Okay.
which is a high-interest book. A lot of the kids like it. It does have themes of racism, classism, a little bit about, it doesn't go as far with misogyny as To Kill a Mockingbird does, but it does also have that. We have had some work with Brown Girl Dreaming, not implemented the way as was suggested by our consultant in that instance. That's a text that we had tried at the 10th grade level a little bit and then seemed more appropriate for younger grades. So they were trying that. However, we did get feedback from the teachers that one not their favorite. So that was definitely up on the, like, where does that belong? They didn't believe it had the strong enough text complexity, although it does have some of the same themes. It's written in, a lot of it is poetry, but they didn't feel like it really got the kids at an 8th grade level, and maybe it belonged in a different one. So as part of the ELA audit, that was always going to be, you know, something we reconsider anyway. But yes, it was important to the teachers and as to us as a district that we found something to try in the meantime that still addresses those things, because, you know, human development is part of the curriculum that you get out of novels as well.
And then also, the kinds of resources that we have to help teachers teach difficult topics.
Yeah.
And not something you need to answer tonight.
Mm-hmm.
But just as a district, what are we doing to provide those kinds of resources to our teachers? Especially as we're going through a curricular audit and, you know, we're thinking about preparing contemporary citizens, we're thinking about diversity and inclusion, and we're thinking about social emotional wellness. Like, those are, you know, sort of our main goals. What are we doing? What kinds of resources are we developing? Maybe it is a consultant. How are we going to vet the consultant? Things like that, that we can make sure that we are adequately preparing our teachers to teach those kinds of materials.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
And
just
that's,
something.
thank you for mentioning that. That is ongoing work. And I know it's, you know, our teachers are professionals. As Mrs. Vitale said, they're professionals. They care deeply about their students, about what they teach. And they want to do it well, and they want to do it in a manner that grows students as citizens, but also that kids can feel good about, like, while they're in the classroom as well. And they, that is important. And so we have had various professional development trying to help with that piece of it, but I appreciate the look at it as part of the curriculum, is that the resources have those supports built in. So thank you for raising that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think to add to Dr. Crispin's point, one of the questions I asked earlier about the DCIU is that what are the learnings that we can take away from it? And so I'm hopeful, or I'm hoping rather, that there are some learnings that our teachers and administrations can take away from it, specifically as it relates to cultural proficiency and this sense of belonging, while also being able to grapple with those tough topics, tough things that are part of everyday life that we do need to explore. But while exploring them, there has to be this balance of a sense of belonging. And so I'm hoping that with those learnings, with additional resources, that we can continue to accomplish both things, because they need to work well, and it's a part of our district goals. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And then the other request I would make is, as you're thinking through the novel review process and what that system looks like, maybe that's something that you could report back at a future curriculum committee meeting, because I think that would be useful information for the board to know, and probably the public as well. And kind of, you know, what we've learned from this process. And just another question, I guess, like how often does this come up? I don't know, to do like sort of an off-cycle audit of a specific.
This, other than like a new AP test got developed, so you have to get a new AP text. This is the only time that this came up as we had embarked on sort of this belonging work. But that's why we wanted a process, because we weren't sure if in surfacing that, would it be something that occurs? And then we had a little bit longer period between the ELA curriculum audits than we normally would. It's supposed to be every 6 years, but we had to pause for 2 different years, so it was a little longer than usual. So I think that's something to consider too, you know, like where would that occur if it were to occur again? Yeah.
Okay, yeah, but I think, that would be
Right, some
information,
criteria for it.
Yeah, just like what the process would look like, how, like, what would trigger that process?
Sure.
You know, kind of what report out would look like, you know, who's getting what information, just kind of all of that, and when. All of that, I think, would be really useful as you're kind of, as you're sort of looking over this past novel review, even though it kind of got cut short because of COVID. But
No, that makes sense. And I like the idea of having the communication as part of the process, so there's like no question anymore. You know what I mean? It's not left up to interpretation. It's like, okay, yeah, we know at some point this is what's going to get reported, so that helps.
Yeah, and I do think, as Ms. Vitale mentioned, like if the teachers weren't, you know, that formalization of the teachers giving the feedback or receiving feedback or anything, you know, so formalizing that as part of the process so that it can be ensured that that is happening, because it is an important part.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you know, having that, I appreciate having that formal process, and kind of those checking components built into that process, I think. Would be.
I'm sorry, I had 2 more questions.
Sure.
So if it wasn't, you're saying Sage Wellness did not make the call in the book, it obviously wasn't the teachers because they wanted the book. Was that, then the administration just made the call on pausing the book?
So as I mentioned in my remarks, we brought this to Dr. Rushi, and Dr. Rushi let me know, and then I shared with the teachers that she would need to hear from them a rationale why this was the only book that met these themes and standards in order for it to remain in the curriculum. And at that point, I shared
That's
that
kind
with
of a weird thing. I mean, because, you know, you could take any book that you use to teach any theme, and that's not the only book that, you know, I mean, there's not one book that can be used for just to teach racism, or one book that can only be used misogyny or anti-Semitic, like there's many books. And so, I mean, I think it's clear from, they felt pointless. They did not petition because they knew it wasn't going to go. They did everything that they possibly could. And at that point, it
would be fruitful.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a waste of their time at that point. So, all right, so that was the final call. And then just an honest question here. I know we paused it and we're going to look at it again, but why would the teachers or anyone think anything would change? I mean, why would you listen to them now? I'm just a straight up question. Like, why would you, if you didn't listen to them before, why would you listen to them 3 years? Like, now we're going to listen to, like, like why, what
Well,
we think?
I think we didn't get to finish the process, so we don't know how it would turn out. I think one of the questions in hindsight to ponder, and even when you look at what local districts are doing or how people are doing it across the area, is that, you know, maybe it's a matter of like, where is it? Maybe it's not 8th grade, maybe it's in a higher grade. You know, there are several of the couple of the 7 districts that responded to our survey. 2 of them taught it in 8th grade, others taught it in upper grades, and others didn't teach it at all. So it might be more a matter of, you know, where's the right spot for it and where does it fit among the larger curriculum for the year? Because it is a pretty hefty piece of a curriculum, you know what I mean? It's
Definitely.
many weeks of the unit, and
Absolutely.
how do you work that in with what else is being taught, and still provide for all of these things that we were talking about. Yeah.
Okay.
And I will just say also, I do appreciate that your question is, of course, it's about the text, but it's really about the process. And
Absolutely.
I do appreciate
Absolutely.
that. And I just want to reiterate that and notice.
And I
that's
was
the
glad you
case.
said that. It could have been,
Yeah.
maybe that it is, this book might add a little extra
yeah,
fuel to the
sure.
fire for sure, but
Yeah,
this could have been about the Great Gatsby.
could have been anything.
To Catcher in the Rye, like, you know, it could have been,
Yeah, so thank you.
no, thank you.
I just have one more question.
Sure.
As you were kind of talking about refining the process,
Yeah.
is there, and this may not be the correct term, but like a teacher, team, lead, liaison, where it's not led by administration, but it's led by, and you're gonna have to help me here with the language.
Like a teacher group, yeah,
Right, where they are like the representation, so that if teachers A, B, and C have concerns, maybe they're not comfortable bringing it to the whole group, they can then bring it to this core teacher group that can go on to the next step, because I do think there's value in having conversations without administrators present.
Right, yeah.
It's like this safe space.
Different thing.
I value
yeah.
that, and so how can we create a space
Excuse me.
and as a part of the review process, so that we are making sure that we're tapping and getting everyone's feedback.
Yeah, there are some more formal, excuse me, like, excuse me, faculty advisory committees.
Okay.
Where teachers work with sort of a representative group of teachers, and then they sometimes bring whatever concerns there might be or something like that to the building administration. We don't have the same sort of district-wide piece of it, but we are looking at, we're excited that for the first time, we're going to be able to have some core curriculum mentors at the middle school level. So there will be an identified liaison for the English department that can, part of what they do is work with teachers and then help to share what's happening with teachers, with administrators, and help, sort of with that relationship. And I think that will be a step that would help something like this, even if the teachers weren't feeling comfortable coming to the administrators and saying, I don't think you know what's happening here. There would be a colleague that they could share that with, whose role it would be to share information that, as requested by teachers.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you, everyone, for the discussion. So our last item on the agenda is for public comment. Public comment is invited for all public meetings. I also would note that we have a policy on public comment. It's policy 903, public participation at board meetings. And the administrative regulation also includes committee meetings. I'll read a bit from that, and then I'll give the guidelines for public comment. The board strongly encourages public input and interaction at committee meetings. This discussion and debate that occurs at committee meetings helps the committee make decisions on items to place on the agenda for regular board meetings. While encouraged, public input and interaction at committee meetings is still subject to the guidelines of appropriateness and decorum expressed as to board meetings. At committee meetings, we don't ask for public comment to be submitted ahead of time, although I'm sure we would take it. And I don't have anyone that signed up before. If anyone would like to speak in the public, you can let me know now. First, you'll just have to state your name and confirm your residency in the township. You'll have 3 minutes to give your comment, and if you have any materials, you can put them to the side of the table. Would anyone like to give public comment tonight?
And just as you're going up there, I don't know that we mentioned it at the beginning of the meeting, so I just want folks to know that the meeting and presentations are all recorded. They're not live streamed from committee meetings, but they are recorded and they will be posted on the website. So just so everybody who's speaking is aware of that, I wanted to make sure.
Hi, my name's Sarah Johnson. I am a resident of the township. So I had quite a few questions. I'm really excited that this process is going to be looked at. And earlier in the meeting, we went over some new curriculum that may be adopted for special education. And I really think we need to look at this now, really, you know, before this gets approved at that meeting. I think you said it would be at the end of the summer, that DCIU contract. Because my question is, like, looking at that presentation, there's no links to any of those publishers. Like, there was one where they said their top was the writing workshop, and I'm really concerned that, you know, like when you go to Sage Wellness Group's website, it's not even an education site. It's a one-page site. The first thing it says is verified woman-owned. It doesn't have, like, there's nothing about K-12 education on it. So again, I don't know how we got involved with this company, and like Ms. Vitale said, they're based in Baltimore. But I'm concerned that that's going to keep happening, because I have worked in K-12 publishing before. I've worked for Scholastic. I used to work for the publisher of Vocabulary Workshop. I mean, these are established companies. Like the Writing Foundation, I mean, again, that looked like a one-page, I mean, it didn't look like a very robust website. It's not from a known publisher. A lot of those publishers look like they just popped up. So again, and I'm not saying that they're not valid, and maybe there's a lot more information, but like when you talk about how you're going to look at these different types of curriculum, I mean, you say we consider publisher presentations. Well, what kind of presentation did Sage Wellness provide? I mean, they barely even had a website. So again, I think that's what Ms. Vitale is going back to. It's really about the process of like, how is this being vetted? And like, you're asking for links about, you know, the scores, but why isn't there links to the publishers? Like, you're saying this is our recommendation, and then you're not even giving anybody on the board the link to the publisher. It just doesn't make any sense. You know, I appreciate you giving such a lengthy explanation, Ms. Saska, but it didn't really make any sense, because at the beginning you kept talking about how you were so overwhelmed by the pandemic and Zoom. You were so overwhelmed, but then you had time to include Sage Wellness. It was like, why didn't we put a pause button on Sage Wellness? That doesn't really make any sense. If we're so overwhelmed and the teachers are overwhelmed and the students are overwhelmed, why would you change a book while all this overwhelming things are happening? There's something that's not adding up in the explanation, and I think that's what Ms. Vitale is getting to. And I agree with Ms. Vitale. I think we have phenomenal teachers here. So why are we paying for the same thing 3 times? 7 years ago, the ELA department and the ELA teachers, they did the audit. Now we're paying DCIU for the teachers to go through professional development, and then we're again paying DCIU to do the audit. So we're incurring additional costs that we didn't pay for 7 years ago. So now we're paying for an audit. So we paid Sage Wellness over $30,000 to offend the English teachers. I mean, basically that's what we did.
Was not the
so at that point, like, I just think, how much money are we going to pay DCIU, and why are we paying for professional development? I mean, I think the English department is perfectly capable of doing their own audit. Again, I think that's the one thing that everybody agrees on, is that there are phenomenal teachers here. And I do agree with Ms. Vitale. I think the way the administration is going about things are really creating a lot of distrust between the teachers and the administration. And I know you're saying we'll talk to the teachers, but I think a lot of that trust is already severed. So, I mean, maybe Dr. King's suggestion of making something where, like, you know, there's a safe space, but the fact that we even got to the point where teachers that work at Haverford need a safe space because they don't trust going to the administration directly when they see a big problem. And I think that you were probably alerted to this problem, and then it just wasn't addressed, because this Sage Wellness thing did go on for a long time. And again, I apologize. Maybe that's not true. Maybe you really were not in the know, but I don't, what were you in the know about of what Sage Wellness, like what kind of actual metrics did they ever provide? Because we are just hearing there's a lot of verbal communication, but there's no metrics. And I mean, we find the same thing with UPenn. And again, you know, people ask questions to the administration. Like, I've been asking over and over that question about why the students are being asked about their parents' income level on that PSSM survey. And Dr. Rushi told me it's like, oh, that's just one data point. That's one data thing that they're collecting, but why? And I feel like if we're paying UPenn yearly, we should be able to ask a question and get an answer. And if that's not the case, then why are we spending our tax money with all these outside entities when we have people that work for the district that are perfectly capable of doing this work? And again, these are not these are outside entities that have not been in K-12 education before. And again, maybe some of these publishers that were suggested in the presentation tonight, I'm not saying that those publishers are not valid, but it does concern me that there's no information about these publishers.
So thank you for sharing that. There are a couple of sort of separating things there. What you're speaking about there is the special education resources that Natalia and Nicole spoke to us about, just having some links available to
I mean, I went to
look at those particular resources. I can talk to them about that.
Yeah, because we're saying consider publisher presentations, but I mean, and I'm not saying that these smaller publishers don't have validity and you have to be a Pearson or somebody to get a contract with a school district. There could be great, like you said, there was somebody from a university that the teachers had a great experience with, and I'm sure that person doesn't have, thousands of employees. So I'm not saying that's not valid, but you do need something. You have to have something. And as far as Sage Wellness, I just don't think that they worked in education. And if they were recommended by another district to you, I would really reach out to that district, because I think you need at this point to warn other districts not to engage with this company. And again, I mean, over $30,000 is gone. I mean, we spent $30,000 to get rid of To Kill a Mockingbird.
I want to just be very clear that was a different scope of work that Sage Wellness did. That was professional development that they gave to the whole staff. I don't even know everything that's involved in that scope of work. It wasn't under my purview at that point. That was not the amount of I think it was definitely less than $2,000. It might have been closer to $1,000 in total for that was spent in total for meetings with administration and some of the services as I described there. So I just don't want to.
Okay, I apologize if that number is wrong. I thought that was correct, because I know there was a grant, but then wasn't it?
A particular set of scope of work, but it did not include this work. This was not.
So wasn't there initially a grant in 2019, and then we paid in 2020 and 2021?
Yes.
So you're saying that
was not a part of this work. That was a different scope of work.
But in total, how much money do you think we paid?
Oh, I would not answer that question without checking with the business
that's what
department.
I'm saying. I think if you go back to the Sage Wellness contract.
To Sage Wellness in total is what you mean,
Yes.
not for this work. Okay, yeah.
But
I hear
still,
you.
what did we get for, say it was, whatever amount it was,
I hear
what
that.
did we
Okay.
actually receive back from Sage Wellness?
Okay, yep, I hear that. I just
It
didn't
is
want to.
approaching, I mean, I have the two big contracts, which you're saying did not include 18,995 and 13,000, plus you said smaller, which I appreciate you clarifying to me that only the bigger 10,000 and above get approved by the board.
Yeah.
But I guess to Ms. Johnson's point,
18
now
plus
all this work
13
to me is
plus,
suspect too. What did we get?
I mean, it's there was no reports, and like you said, we don't really seem to have anything, what do we have in writing from Sage Wellness as a measurable result of what our tax dollars paid for and what we received in return? I guess is my question.
At committee meetings, we do give more leeway, but it is pushing 9 p.m. And you've been up for almost 10 minutes. Is there anyone else in the public that wants to give comment? If we could move on.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate you giving me extra time. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Hi, Alexis Pasternak. I just wanted to comment really quickly on what Ms. Vitale said, those teachers experienced. That would be, in my opinion, a modern day struggle session, and it's wrong. Look it up, struggle sessions, a modern day struggle session, okay? It's wrong, and it's being done to our children as well. And if people don't start realizing that that's what's occurring, then I don't know what else to tell you. You have an anti-racist resolution that says this district is systemically racist. It's a slap in the face. I've lived here my whole life. I'm not a perfect human being, but, we've been on not a great path for the last few years. And then we should also start looking at these outside nonpartisan groups that have had influence on our board. So that's all. I'm not saying anything new. I'm just trying to get people to be interested in what's actually going on in this town. Thank you.
I think there was someone else who wanted to give public comment as well. Sure. If you could just state your name and confirm your residency in the district.
Hi, my name is Kevin McNicholas. I am going to be a senior this year at the high school. So I was the year of 2020 when we did read this book. And like you said, there were probably about 50 pages left or so. And I know my class, and I really did like this book, it really taught about, you know, I should say I didn't necessarily know that, like, this was reality in the South in the 1930s. This is what happened. So I think that it really opens up students' eyes, like, this is what happened. And with the Sage Wellness, I think in 2019, when these 4 to 5 students were spoken to, were they picked from, or were they brought because they were complaining about the book? So I think that is a good point that Ms. Vitale did bring up. But then we're also, this company, Sage Wellness, I believe it's from Baltimore, Maryland. I looked at the website. It's a 1-page website with a few bullet points about what their mission is. How did we get involved with this company? I really don't know. We have a great English department that I believe really could do this audit on themselves. And we used this company for other audits with our English department. I'm not sure if it was with other departments. And that is money that was spent from our taxpayers, which, as everyone knows in this township, it's a lot of money already. It was just more money spent. When we have teachers told that they are racist for sticking up for this book, that's disgusting. I mean, thank you for these teachers for sticking up. And if Ms. Vitale did not bring up these statements tonight, would we have ever realized this is really what was happening? I mean, this was 4 years ago, and we're just learning about this now. It's 2023. This happened in 2019, and we were just learning about this now. Also, I forget exactly what his name was, but he said he's not going to read To Kill a Mockingbird because it is from a white author. E. Scott Fitzgerald was her name, I believe, right?
The Harper Lee.
Harper Lee, sorry. Mm-hmm. Harper Lee. Sure. She's a great author from that time, and you're going to say that you won't read books because of a white author. It's disgusting if you say I won't read books because it's a black author. It's disgusting if you say I won't read books because it is a Jewish author. No matter what, that is disgusting, because our school district has people from every single background. So you're going to frame point one particular background and say, I won't read this because of that. I also went on to the Instagram of Sage Wellness and scrolled back to 2019. There were 2 posts, one in the middle school library and one in the high school library. And there were not hundreds, but there were many teachers in here, parents, I believe, administrations. And if they're being told these things, that's what they're going to think. And they will bring this back probably to other meetings and relay it on students. And I just think it is, disgusting. Like you said, we have many good teachers. 85% of teachers will go above and beyond to do what is great for their students. They will leave. We will not have these great teachers if they are told things like this. That's really what I just wanted to say.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I do want to, just for context there, just to mention that Sage Wellness is not the group that we are proposing to the ELA curriculum audit. That is the Delaware County IU. That's the proposal comes from them. They are the ones who help to conduct the special education audit as well. But that I completely understand your point. I just wanted to provide that clarification there. And the see, kids are so good at research, right? It's a different kind of research, but like that, right? Going back to the Instagram, like the primary resource, that's good. Just to clarify, I don't have it in front of me, but I can say in that time period, there was professional development provided around belongingness. So that was about like attachment theory and how we can make sure that students feel a sense of belonging when they are here. So there was belongingness for staff, and then there were those parent workshops that were offered just for anyone who wanted to attend. So that may be what you were looking at there, just so to provide a little bit extra information about what that could have been. I don't have it in front of me.
Okay, I didn't see anyone else for public comment. All right, thanks everyone. Meeting's adjourned. I'm gonna use the gavel again.
Thank you.